Look around at your life. Every part of it. Your relationships, your body, your finances, your emotions, your level of fulfillment. It's all a reflection of your standards. Not your goals, not your dreams, not your hopes, your standards. That invisible line you've drawn in the sand that says, "This is the least I will accept from myself." That's what your life is built on. We all get what we must have. Not what we want, not what we wish. What we require. Most people confuse goals with standards. They set goals and never reach them, because the goal is just a wish without the foundation of a raised standard. But when something becomes a non-negotiable, when it becomes a must, you stop playing around. You show up differently. You talk differently. You act with a sense of certainty, even when the outcome isn't clear. Your standards are like the thermostat in your home. If the temperature drops below a certain level, the heat kicks in. If your life starts slipping below your standard, do you turn on the heat or do you freeze? That's the question. Because your life can't rise above the level of your standards. You can get lucky for a while. You can push through with willpower for a moment. But the moment pressure hits, when life throws chaos your way, your default standard is where you fall back. If your standard is, "I'll just get by financially," you'll find a way to scrape through even when things are tough. If your standard is, "I take absolute ownership for my wealth, my growth, and my freedom," you're not waiting for a raise, a bailout, or some miracle opportunity. You become the opportunity. Because people don't rise to the level of their goals. They fall to the level of their standards. You want to transform your body. It's not the perfect diet or the ideal workout plan that makes the difference. It's the standard you set for how you treat your body. Do you treat it like a temple, or do you treat it like a trash can? "I should eat better." Or do you say, "I don't put that garbage in my body." Period. That's a standard. And when that becomes part of your identity, change isn't hard, it's automatic. People talk about discipline like it's the magic pill. Discipline is important, but standards come before discipline. You don't discipline yourself to brush your teeth. You just do it because your standard is, "I don't go out with stinky breath." You don't think about it, you don't debate it, you live it. It's habitual because it's based on identity. Your standard is who you believe you are expressed in your habits. Let's talk about relationships. You want to have an extraordinary partnership. Then raise your standard for the love you give, not just the love you receive. Most people wait. When they treat me better, then I'll show up. That's not a standard, that's a reaction. If your standard is that you bring passion, respect, and communication to your relationship every day, no matter what, then your relationship changes. Maybe not instantly, but eventually. Because you're not playing at the level of what's common. You're living by a code, and people around you feel it. Now, here's the truth: everyone already has standards. Some people's standard is, "I always pay my bills, but I'm always broke." That's their line. They won't go below it. They'll always make it just in time, but they'll never rise above it either. That's not life, that's survival. And survival standards will never get you to a life that feels rich, meaningful, and full of purpose. Because they're not designed for that. They're designed to keep you breathing, not to help you thrive. Every breakthrough begins with a decision to never go back. That moment you say, "I will not live like this another day. I will not settle. I will not lower my standard just to make someone else comfortable. I will not tolerate this behavior, from others or from myself." That's when things begin to shift. Not when you have a better plan. Not when you have more money. Not when the timing's right. When your standard shifts, your energy shifts. Your focus sharpens. Your commitment deepens. And suddenly, what felt impossible becomes inevitable. Think about any time in your life when you made a massive change. I guarantee it wasn't just because you felt inspired. It was because something inside of you finally said enough. Enough playing small. Enough shrinking to fit. Enough pretending things are okay when they're not. Enough tolerating a job, a relationship, a habit that doesn't serve you. You raised your standard, and the world had no choice but to respond. You teach people how to treat you by the standards you hold. If you let people walk on you, they will. If you show them you don't bend on your boundaries, they'll adjust. But it starts with you. What you're willing to accept is what the world will hand you. If you settle, you get scraps. If you raise your standards, you attract a higher caliber of opportunity, of people, of results. This isn't about perfection. It's about the line you draw and refuse to cross again. It's about what becomes unacceptable. You have to make it personal. It's not just about saying, "I want a better life." It's about owning the truth. I demand a better life for myself. I demand more from the way I think, act, speak, and live. I no longer tolerate the version of me that says maybe tomorrow. I show up. Now. There's a lie the world has sold you, and too many people have bought it. It says your past defines your future. It says the conditions around you, where you were born, how you were raised, the economy, your age, your trauma, your genetics, your education, are the blueprint for your destiny. That's nonsense. The truth, your life is not shaped by your conditions. Your life is shaped by your decisions. And until you take ownership of that truth, you will always be a slave to your environment. The moment you believe that conditions determine your future, you hand over your power. You tell the world, I'm a passenger here. I don't control the wheel. And that kind of thinking is why people stay stuck for years. That's why people say, I can't because of this. Or, if only that hadn't happened. They're worshiping their story instead of rewriting it. The reality is, history is filled with people who had every reason to give up, every condition stacked against them, and still decided to rise. It's not the external that stops you, it's the internal. Because here's the hard truth, in every moment, you are making decisions. You decide how to interpret what happens to you. You decide what meaning to attach to an event. You decide what to focus on, what to believe, and how to respond. And those micro decisions, they become your life. Stack enough of the wrong decisions, hesitation, fear, excuses, and you'll build a prison. Stack the right ones, commitment, courage, action, and you'll build a life that most people only dream about. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. They don't exist. You think the successful waited for the economy to be perfect, for everyone to believe in them, for the market to calm down, for the fear to disappear. No, they made decisions in the middle of the storm. They said, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what I will build, no matter what's going on around me. And those decisions carved a new path. Not just for them, but for everyone who came after. When you raise your standards, you force better decisions. If your standard is survival, you'll make survival decisions. Stay safe, play small, don't rock the boat. But if your standard is excellence, you'll make different decisions, bigger moves, faster actions, bolder conversations. The decision always comes first. You don't need certainty before you decide. You decide, and then you build the certainty with repetition, with movement, with resolve. Most people are trapped in the illusion of powerlessness. They say, I'll change when I feel ready. That's backwards. The decision comes before the readiness. You decide and then your nervous system catches up. You decide and then your identity starts to shift. That's how change happens, not by waiting but by deciding. People think emotions are the problem. Emotions are not the problem, decisions about emotions are. You feel fear, so that's human. The question is, what do you decide to do with that fear? Run from it? Hide? Freeze? Or do you feel it, breathe through it, and move forward anyway? The people who win at life aren't fearless. They're decision makers. They decide to take the step in spite of the emotion, not because the emotion is gone. And here's something you've got to lock in: indecision is also a decision. When you don't choose, you are choosing, by default. You're choosing to let life happen to you instead of through you. You're choosing to stay in the same cycle, the same pattern, the same frustration. Every time you say, I don't know, you're deciding to stay stuck. Every time you delay, you're deciding to delay your power. Every time you hesitate, you give momentum to the part of you that wants to stay small. You have to become someone who decides fast and commits fully. Not recklessly, but with intention, because the longer you hesitate, the more you invite doubt. Doubt grows in delay. Confidence grows in clarity. And clarity is a result of decisive action. You don't get it by thinking your way through every possible scenario. You get it by moving, by making a decision, by testing, failing, adjusting, and deciding again. Your destiny doesn't come knocking. It doesn't show up with a permission slip. It's built by what you decide to believe about who you are and what you're here to do. Some people make the decision once and wait for life to follow. That's not enough. You have to make the decision every day, sometimes every hour. Because the world will test it. Your old patterns will test it. People who don't understand your vision will test it. And every time you recommit to your decision, you strengthen the foundation of the life you're building. This is where true power lies. Not in control of others, not in changing every external thing around you, but in choosing your attitude, choosing your energy, choosing your standards, choosing your habits, choosing what you tolerate, choosing what you chase, choosing what you walk away from. That's where freedom is. That's where transformation starts. Not when the conditions shift, but when you do. Not when the outside changes, but when your inner world declares, I've decided who I am, and I will no longer accept anything less. There is no force more powerful in the human psyche than the need to stay consistent with who you believe you are. Your identity is the script you unconsciously follow, the story you keep telling yourself, the internal blueprint that governs how you show up in the world. And until that identity changes, no amount of willpower, motivation, or strategy will produce lasting transformation. Because behavior is the surface, identity is the root. People don't just act a certain way. They act based on how they see themselves. If you see yourself as someone who's always late, it doesn't matter how many planners you buy or time management apps you download. Your subconscious will always bring you back to being the one who's always late. Because that's who you believe you are. If you see yourself as someone who struggles financially, you'll find a way to lose money or stay stuck in lack, no matter how much you earn. Not because you want to, but because your identity demands alignment. You'll sabotage anything that violates your identity. If you've convinced yourself that you're not worthy of love, you'll push it away when it shows up. If you think you're someone who's bad with discipline, you'll start strong and then bail the second it gets uncomfortable. That's not a motivation issue, that's identity conflict. You're trying to live a new life with an old self-image. And that never works. Change doesn't last when you're trying to do something new. It lasts when you become someone new. When you upgrade your identity, your behavior has no choice but to follow. You stop fighting with yourself. You stop negotiating every decision. You don't have to talk yourself into showing up. You are someone who shows up. You don't need to force confidence. You've become someone who commands it. You're no longer performing the behavior. You're living the identity. This is why most people struggle with consistency. They keep trying to change what they do without ever questioning who they are. They say, I want to be fit, but they still see themselves as someone who hates the gym or who always quits after 2 weeks. They say, I want to be wealthy, but their identity is built around struggle, scarcity, or playing small. So they bounce from one plan to another, chasing strategies instead of upgrading their identity. And the second things get hard, their old self reclaims control. Your identity is a set of beliefs you've accepted as truth. It wasn't given to you. You adopted it. Maybe from your parents, your environment, your failures, your trauma, your victories. Somewhere along the way, you started saying things like, that's just the way I am, and you made it law. But here's the truth, identity is flexible, it's malleable, it can be rewritten, and if you don't consciously create it, your environment will do it for you. The fastest way to shift your life is to upgrade the identity you operate from. Don't wait until you have the results to believe it. Decide first. You don't need permission to start calling yourself powerful, disciplined, resourceful, unstoppable. You need courage. You need to back it up with action. You need to behave like that person now. Not next week, not after the next seminar or podcast now. Because every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. Identity doesn't change overnight, but it does change in moments. Moments of decision, moments of intensity, moments where you say, I've had enough, and then you act on it. You interrupt the pattern. You prove to yourself that the old version of you is not in charge anymore. Not through talk, through action, through repetition, through alignment between what you say and what you do. If you want to live at a higher level, you have to create an identity that matches that level. You can't say you want excellence and keep identifying with average. You can't say you want deep connection and still call yourself someone who's emotionally closed off. You can't say you want to lead and keep saying, I'm just not good with people. That's conflict. That's resistance. That's a war between the life you want and the identity you're clinging to. Look at the people who lead, inspire, dominate in their fields. What sets them apart isn't just skill, it's the certainty of who they are. They know their values, they know their mission. They've decided what they're about, and they live it. Not because they're special, because they've done the work of shaping their identity on purpose. They've deleted the stories that no longer serve them. They've installed new beliefs that support the vision they're creating. You can do the same, but you have to be brutally honest. What identities are you holding on to that are keeping you small? What labels have you accepted that no longer align with who you're becoming? What limitations have you turned into facts? You've got to tear those out at the root. You've got to choose again, not once, but daily. Because identity is not a one-time declaration. It's a lifestyle. This isn't about pretending. This isn't about faking it until you make it. It's about aligning how you act, speak, think, and decide with the identity of the person who already has the results you want. You don't wait to feel ready. You become ready by taking action as that version of yourself. And every time you do, you weaken the old identity and reinforce the new one. Until one day you look around and realize you're not trying to become that person anymore. You are that person. Everybody has a list of things they should do. I should eat healthier. I should spend more time with my family. I should work out more. I should finally start that business. The world is filled with people drowning in shoulds. But the truth is, shoulds don't change your life. Musts do. And until you turn your shoulds into musts, you're just flirting with your potential instead of committing to it. You don't get your goals. You get your musts. Because a must is non-negotiable. A must is a standard you enforce, not a preference you hope for. People act on their musts, they postpone their shoulds. When something is a should, you put it off until next week, next month, next year, or worse, forever. But when something becomes a must, it moves to the top of your priority list. You stop making excuses. You stop negotiating with your limitations. You make it happen, period. The difference between people who change their lives and those who stay stuck isn't talent, intelligence, or luck. It's emotional leverage. It's getting to a place where the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the pain of change. That's when the shift happens. That's when you raise your standard from, I should, to, I must. Because when something becomes a must, your brain starts searching for solutions instead of permission. There's a difference in energy between the two. When someone says, I should lose weight, you can feel the hesitation. You can hear the story. I've tried before. It's hard. I don't have time. But when someone says, I must change my body, I'm done feeling like this, the tone changes. The posture shifts. You hear certainty. You feel conviction because musts carry emotional weight. Musts are connected to identity. When your actions and your values align at that level, nothing can stop you. And if something gets in your way, you bulldoze through or build a new path. Think about the things you've already transformed in your life. You didn't do it because it was a cute idea. You did it because something snapped. You hit a wall, you got tired of your own excuses. You saw the truth and said, I can't live like this another day. That moment of disgust, of deep hunger, of raw honesty, that's where musts are born. It's not always pretty. It doesn't have to be, but it's real. And real decisions are always emotional before they're logical. People think they need more information. That's not true. You already know what to do. You know how to lose weight. You know how to grow your business. You know how to improve your relationships. You don't have a knowledge problem. You have a standards problem. You've been living in a sea of shoulds, hoping motivation will carry you. But motivation is weak when your standards are soft. The only thing that will move you consistently is raising your musts. Here's the dangerous part about shoulds. They make you feel like you're doing something when you're not. You talk about it. You write it down. You dream about it. You tell your friends, yeah, I'm going to start that next month. But there's no consequence to not following through. Because deep down, you haven't committed. You've intellectualized your dream instead of making it part of your identity. You've romanticized progress instead of demanding it from yourself. But when you convert that should into a must, you light a fire. You activate a part of yourself that doesn't need external permission, that doesn't need the perfect moment, that doesn't need everything to be clear. You just go. You act now. You execute. Not because you feel like it, but because anything less becomes unacceptable. That's what a must does. It creates emotional tension, and that tension pulls you forward. A must is not about being rigid. It's not about being perfect. It's about having a line you will not cross again. It's about looking yourself in the mirror and saying, I'm done tolerating this level of energy, this level of health, this level of communication, this level of mediocrity. You don't need to scream it to the world. You don't need to post about it online. You need to feel it in your bones. You need to look at your life and say, this gets handled now, not someday. People often say they're afraid of failing. But that's rarely the truth. What they're really afraid of is making a real decision. Because a real decision means the story ends, the excuses expire, the drama disappears, and you're left with one thing: action. That's why most people keep their dreams in the should category, because it gives them a safe way out. If I fail, I didn't really mean it. If I quit, I never really started. But when you raise your should to a must, you cut off the exit. You declare, I'm in this, all the way. No matter what, you want to shift your life fast. Grab a pen, and write down everything in your life that's currently a should. Everything you've been tolerating, everything you've been putting off, everything you've been postponing until the kids are grown, until the money's right, until the fear goes away. And then circle the one thing that, if you turned it into a must, would shift everything else. That's your lever. That's the decision you've been avoiding. That's the moment your next level starts. Not when it's convenient, not when you're ready, but the moment you stop treating your future like an option. You can have the strongest will in the world. But if you're surrounded by people who normalize mediocrity, you're going to fight a battle you don't even realize you're losing. Because environment isn't just where you are, it's what you absorb. It's the people you interact with, the energy in the room, the beliefs that get echoed around you. Your environment speaks to you every second of every day. And if you're not consciously shaping it, it's unconsciously shaping you. Your standards are not formed in isolation. They're influenced by the conversations you hear, the behavior you witness, and the examples you allow to set the bar for what's normal. If everyone around you is playing small, if the people closest to you make excuses, complain about life, settle for average, you start to think that's acceptable, not because you agree, but because it's familiar. And familiarity breeds complacency. This is why some people struggle for years with no progress. Not because they lack drive, but because they're surrounded by people who have none. You can be hungry for more, but if your circle isn't, that hunger turns into frustration. You're trying to grow in soil that doesn't support growth. You're trying to fly with people who are comfortable crawling. And eventually, unless you're hyper-aware, their standards become your ceiling. We are social creatures. We adapt. Even if you're independent, even if you pride yourself on doing things your own way, you can't escape the psychological pull of your surroundings. The moment you walk into a room, your subconscious starts scanning. What's acceptable here? How do people operate here? What's the energy like here? And your nervous system starts aligning, even when you don't notice. That's the power of environment. It's invisible, but it's relentless. If you want to raise your life, you have to raise the standard of the environments you allow yourself to live in. You have to get honest about what spaces you're in and what those spaces are doing to your identity. Are you in rooms that stretch you or ones that shrink you? Are your conversations about growth, possibility, mission? Or are they about gossip, fear, and limitation? Are you spending time with people who challenge you to be better or people who validate your comfort zone? You don't need 100 people around you. You need a few who live at the level you aspire to reach. People whose very presence demands you rise. People who don't just talk about ambition, they live it. People who don't just say, you can do it, but ask you why you're not already doing it. That kind of environment forces you to confront your excuses. It makes it uncomfortable to stay stuck, and discomfort is often the doorway to transformation. There are two types of environments, reactive and intentional. Most people live in reactive environments. They hang out with whoever they happen to be around. They go wherever life pulls them. They consume whatever shows up in front of their face. Their mental diet is garbage, filled with fear, negativity, small thinking, and then they wonder why they feel uninspired. That's not a mystery. That's math. Garbage in, garbage out. An intentional environment is crafted, created, designed. It's not just physical, though your physical space matters. It's psychological, emotional, energetic. What do you allow into your head? Who has access to your energy? What kind of conversations are you having? What kind of expectations are being reinforced daily? That's your real environment. And when you raise the quality of that, your standards follow. When your environment demands more, you deliver more. That's why elite athletes train together. That's why masterminds exist. That's why top performers surround themselves with winners. Because they know the fastest way to raise your level is to raise the level of your surroundings. When you're around people who refuse to settle, you start to question your own settling. When you're around excellence, mediocrity becomes unbearable. That's when you grow. That's when you change, not just through strategy, but through immersion. And this isn't just about people. It's about everything you expose yourself to. What are you watching? What are you listening to? What messages are you soaking in? Because your mind is always listening. If you start your day scrolling through chaos and noise, you're priming yourself for distraction. If you surround yourself with scarcity thinking, you'll start making decisions from lack instead of abundance. If you're constantly exposed to limitations, your brain will start accepting those limitations as truth. This is why rituals matter, why morning routines matter, Why mental hygiene matters. You've got to protect your energy like your life depends on it. Because it does. Every choice you make about your environment is either feeding your growth or feeding your excuses. There's no neutral ground. You're either rising or you're reinforcing the habits that are keeping you stuck. Some people hear this and feel guilty. They think, but these are my friends. This is my family. These are my coworkers. This isn't about cutting people out of your life. It's about recognizing the difference between love and influence. You can love someone and still limit the amount of influence they have on your mindset. You can care about people and still choose to elevate your space, because your future is not a group project. It's personal, and you've got to build it in a way that aligns with your highest standard. Not what's familiar, not what's easy, but what's required. When you shift your environment, everything else follows. Your standards rise because your reference point changes. What used to be impressive becomes average. What used to feel impossible becomes your new baseline. You start making different choices, taking different actions, speaking a different language. Not because you're forcing it, but because you've become someone who lives in a different energetic world. That's what happens when your environment no longer matches the old you. It becomes the incubator for the new you. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. And your standards aren't just something you say, they're something you prove every single day by what you do. Words are cheap. Vision boards are easy. But rituals, that's where the truth lies. Your rituals are the actions that reinforce who you believe you are. They are the structure, the foundation, the daily declaration of what your life is built upon. If you want to change your life, you don't start with the outcome, you start with the ritual. Every person has rituals, whether they realize it or not. Most people just have rituals that reinforce low standards. They wake up late, scroll through their phone first thing, eat whatever's convenient, hit the snooze button on their health, their mindset, their purpose, and they wonder why they feel out of control. It's not a mystery. It's math. What you do consistently becomes who you are. Your rituals write the story of your life, one chapter at a time, and if those rituals don't align with your highest standard, you're building your identity on sand. Rituals are sacred. They're personal. They're the guardrails between you and the chaos of life, because life will pull at you, life will test you, life will offer you every excuse in the book. And if you don't have rituals that keep your standard high, you will slip fast. When it gets hard, you don't rise by inspiration, you rise by discipline. You fall back on structure, you fall back on repetition, you fall back on what you've rehearsed so many times it becomes automatic. And that's what rituals give you, an edge in moments when willpower isn't enough. People overcomplicate change. They think they need to change their entire life overnight. But that's not how it works. Change happens when you master the little things. When you take ownership of the first hour of your day, when you choose intention over distraction, when you commit to that workout even when you're tired, when you journal even when your mind is racing, when you choose water over sugar, books over noise, action over talk. That's what it looks like to live a high standard. Not just when it's easy, but when it's inconvenient. That's when the standard gets real. And here's the part most people miss. Rituals aren't just about productivity, they're about identity. Every time you follow through on a ritual that reflects your highest standard, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. And over time, those votes build self-trust. Confidence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build by keeping promises to yourself. And that only happens through ritual. You don't become confident by hyping yourself up. You become confident by doing the work when no one's watching. You can't fake rituals. They're either there or they're not. You either show up or you don't. And when you're honest with yourself about your rituals, you see exactly where your standards really are. Not where you say they are, but where you live. You can say health matters, but if your daily ritual is fast food and excuses, your body doesn't care about your words. You can say you want financial freedom, but if your ritual is spending recklessly and avoiding discipline, your bank account reflects the truth. Life doesn't respond to what you hope for. It responds to what you do consistently. High performers don't wait for motivation. They have rituals. They train themselves to move regardless of emotion. That's what separates the dreamers from the doors. It's not intensity, it's consistency. It's showing up day after day, even if you're tired, even if it's boring, even if no one's clapping, because that's the moment that builds you. That's the moment that forges a new identity. That's the moment the standard becomes unshakable, because now it's embedded in your behavior, not just your belief. You don't need 100 rituals. You need the right ones. Strategic, purposeful actions that reflect your highest values. What do you do when you wake up? What do you do when you feel triggered? What's your ritual for refueling your energy? For focusing your mind? For reconnecting with your mission? These aren't luxury habits. They're survival habits if you want to live at a world-class level. Without rituals, life owns you. With rituals, you own your direction, and it's not about being robotic. Rituals give you freedom. Most people think freedom is doing whatever you want, whenever you want. But that's chaos. Real freedom comes from knowing that no matter what life throws at you, you've got anchors that keep you grounded, rituals that protect your mindset, rituals that restore your energy, rituals that lock you back into your purpose. That's freedom. Power. That's ownership. When you raise your standards, your rituals must rise with them, because every next level of your life demands a next level of structure. You can't bring yesterday's patterns into tomorrow's opportunities. If your rituals stay the same, your results will stay the same. And that's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to face. They want the upgrade without the process. They want the result without the repetition. But transformation doesn't come from what you want. It comes from what you practice. You want to know what someone's standards really are? Watch their rituals. Watch what they do when they don't feel like it. Watch what they do under pressure. Watch how they start their day, how they end their day, how they recover when life punches them in the face. That's the blueprint. That's the evidence. That's where greatness hides. Not in the big declarations, but in the small disciplines repeated without excuse. Everything you do is either building your identity or breaking it down. Every choice, every action, every standard you enforce or let slide, it's all shaping who you believe you are. Identity isn't fixed. It's fluid. And your standards are the sculptor. Most people think identity is something you're born with or something you discover, but in reality, it's something you build. Every single day, you are casting votes for the person you're becoming, and those votes come in the form of the standards you refuse to compromise. If your standards are low, your identity shrinks to match them. If your standards are high, your identity expands. You become someone who doesn't just believe in change, you embodies it. Identity is not what you say about yourself. It's what you prove to yourself. It's reinforced through repetition, through action, through the quiet moments when no one's watching and you still choose to operate at a higher level. That's where real identity is forged. In discipline, not declarations. We've been conditioned to believe identity is this fixed thing. I'm just not a morning person. I'm not good with money. I've never been confident. But that's not identity. That's a story. A story you've repeated so many times it became a belief. But beliefs are just thoughts with emotional backing. They can be rewritten. The problem is, people try to change their life without changing their identity. They chase new habits while holding on to an old self-image. And that never works, because behavior will always snap back to what you believe is true about you. You don't get what you want. You get what you believe you are. If you want lasting change, you've got to change the standard of who you think you are. That's where the game shifts. Because when you know you're someone who shows up no matter what, you don't need to talk yourself into doing the work. When you know you're someone who holds the line on health, on discipline, on focus, you don't need hype. You don't need motivation. You operate from identity, not impulse. Think about the standards you hold sacred. Maybe you'd never cheat in a relationship. Maybe you'd never steal. Why? Not because it's hard, not because it's impossible, but because it doesn't fit who you are. It violates your identity. That's the power of standards. They create guardrails for behavior. They draw a line in the sand and say, this is who I am. I don't cross this. And when that standard becomes part of your identity, it becomes effortless to uphold. You don't have to think about it. You are it. The mistake most people make is they try to raise their life without raising their standard of self. They want better results while staying emotionally attached to a limited identity. But your external results will always reflect your internal blueprint. You can't outperform your self-image. If deep down you believe you're average, you'll sabotage anything that contradicts that belief. Not because you want to fail, but because success will feel unfamiliar. And the brain is wired to return to the familiar, even if it's painful. That's why real change doesn't come from effort. It comes from alignment. You have to align your behavior with the identity of someone who already lives at the level you want to reach. You don't wait until you feel ready. You act as if. You show up as the person who eats clean, trains daily, leads powerfully, speaks with certainty. not someday, but now. And the more you operate like that person, the more your brain starts to believe, this is who I am. That's how you shift identity. Not in theory, but in motion. Standards create that motion. They're the baseline rules you play by, and over time they become the definition of who you are. Not in a flashy surface level way, but deep in your nervous system. You internalize a new sense of self. You start walking differently, talking differently, thinking differently, because you've upgraded your internal code. You've stopped negotiating with weakness. You've stopped trying to become someone new, and you've started being someone new. The beauty is, this doesn't require perfection. It requires consistency. Every time you say no to something beneath your standard, you strengthen your identity. Every time you say yes to what aligns with your highest values, you reinforce your evolution. You may not see the change in that moment, but it's happening. It's compounding. You're rewiring your patterns, rewriting your story. You're repaving the road ahead. One decision, one action, one standard at a time. When you start living like this, people notice. Not because you told them anything, but because your energy shifts. You carry yourself differently. You show up with certainty. You speak with clarity. You stop needing validation because you're not outsourcing your identity anymore. You're owning it. You're driving it. And that energy is magnetic. People are drawn to someone who knows who they are, who doesn't waver in the face of pressure, who lives their standard without apology. This is where power lies. Not in pretending, not in talking a big game, but in the real, grounded, you earn sense of identity that comes from knowing you live by a higher code. That no matter what life throws at you, your standards won't bend. Your integrity won't collapse. Your vision won't blur. Because this isn't about willpower anymore. It's who you are. And when your identity reaches that level, the results become inevitable. You stop chasing success, and you start living in alignment with it. You stop hustling for significance, and you start embodying your value. Not because the world told you. You told yourself, and then you backed it up with everything you did. That's the standard. And that standard becomes the foundation of the person you were always meant to be. So here's the truth. Your life will rise to the standard you set, not the goals you dream about. Not the vision in your journal, not the affirmations you repeat without action. Standards are the foundation of everything. They're not optional. They're not negotiable. They are the unspoken contracts you've signed with yourself that determine what you tolerate, what you chase, what you create, and what you become. You want to change your life? Raise your standard once, not for a week. Every day, raise the standard of your thoughts, your environment, your rituals, your identity. Stop waiting for the world to get easier. You get stronger. Stop hoping someone else will believe you more than you believe in yourself. That's not their job. It's yours. Own your standard. Enforce it. Protect it. And live it so relentlessly that the old you doesn't even recognize who you've become. Because in the end, you don't get your potential. You get your standards. And when your standards become non-negotiable, your transformation becomes unstoppable.